Here we are again, time to put out another video and get a really controversial reaction. A bit ago I made my first Shaman King video and promised to make another video comparing the whole show to the original that came out in the early 2000s. And I guess most people didn't hear that because they assumed that I was judging the entire show based on the first 3 episodes, but whatever. I was originally going to talk about the entire show in one video, but I decided that I wanted to make this into more of a series, separating this topic into a bunch of parts. Shaman King 2021 recently concluded the Tao family arc, and I've got some things to say. But before I start, I want to say a lot of the things I said in my last video were poorly phrased. I made it sound like the original anime was the original story in general, which wasn't my intention at all, so I'm going to try and avoid that in this video. Second though, because of that first rule, I want to say that this is a discussion about the 2 anime. Let me make this perfectly clear. I honestly don't give a rat's ass what happened in the original manga. I don't care if the new anime is actually more faithful to that manga. If the original anime does something better than the new one, or vice versa, I'm going to talk about it. I won't completely disregard the source material, but I won't decide if something is bad or good just because it was in the manga. Also, apparently nobody knew this last time, but this is just my opinion. You can like the new Shaman King, I just don't, and I'm going to explain why. Okay, here's the video. Just saying, this video is mostly going to be about the Tao family arc in the anime, but I gotta talk about the fight between Yo and Faust. It's pretty bad. So many people were talking about how censored the original was, but the new one isn't that gruesome either. All that's in this version is a few seconds of something that isn't that hard to look at, and that's about it. In fact, I'd argue that the original version was much more terrifying and horrific. At least in that version, the torture that Faust inflicted upon Manta was longer, and, well, looking at this is a lot more unnerving than whatever happened in the new anime. But in all honesty, the manga is probably the most gruesome. I mean, just look at some of these images. Fuck, man, it's only a few panels, but holy shit. Plus, I gotta say, the way the fight plays out in the new anime seems to be missing the point of the fight. In the manga, there's a part where we cut away from the fight and see Silva worrying about Yo, so when we get back to the fight, a little time skip is implied. We see Yo cutting at the skeleton army, and he says, no matter how I cut them, no matter how I kill them, they just keep reviving. This implies that Yo has been cutting down skeleton men for a while now. It's not much, but it's something. In this order of events, we see Yo fight, get tired, and naturally lose his energy. But in the new version, we see Yo swing his sword 4 times, almost 5, and he's already tired. This part, where we're supposed to think that Yo is expending all of his energy, lasts a minute and a half. In the original, it took around half an episode for Yo to feel worn out, and the original changed the stakes of the fight, making it so that Manta was being held hostage by Faust the entire time, meaning that during the fight, Faust constantly taunts Yo by hurting his friend, causing him to expend more energy earlier on, and it works. The fight in the original feels frustrating, annoying even. It feels as though there's not much progress being made, but that's exactly how Yo feels about the situation, causing him to panic even further. It feels like a never-ending gauntlet, and it made you hate Faust until the end. Now that does cause its own problems later on, but that's another discussion for another time. This is the only fight that I really wanted to address in the preliminaries of the Shaman fight, because it's the only one that I feel the new anime really got wrong. That's not to say that I like everything else in this mini arc, just that this was the only fight that physically hurt me, because of the lack of understanding shown by its adapters. In the manga, this fight lasted 7 decently sized chapters, and because of that, it feels like more of a big deal. But when all of that is condensed into one single episode, it feels like it's moving from story beat to story beat too quickly. In both the manga and the original anime, you feel for Yo at the end. You understand his pain, because you went through it too. The frustration of a long, arduous fight, which in the end amounted to seemingly nothing. And that feeling is lost in the episode of the new Shaman King. The new adaptation makes this simple emotion feel flat. It feels meaningless. Apparently not a lot of people know what the definition of being rushed is, as so many people love pointing out the fact that the new Shaman King anime has all of the same scenes as in the manga. And while that's not necessarily true, just because an adaptation does that doesn't make it well-paced. As you can see, the effects of compressing a shit ton of chapters into a single episode is a substantial decrease in quality in the individual events of a story. By the logic that a lot of people use in my comment section, the Promised Neverland Season 2 isn't rushed because they put all of the missing scenes from the manga into a slideshow at the end. In short, it doesn't matter how much of the material actually makes it onto the screen. What matters is how you put the material together. For example, Horimiya is an anime that came out recently. I've heard that it cuts out a lot of material from the manga, but the way it's put together and edited is very competent, and makes the anime enjoyable despite the cutting out of some material. A silent voice cut out a lot of material from the manga, but if you watch it without reading, you won't notice. That's because it's edited and put together really well. But Shaman King, the new one, is not. It's not well edited, in fact it's pretty sloppy. It also seems to cut out minimal content that's actually a lot more important than it seems on a surface level. I talked about this more in detail in my follow-up video to my original Shaman King video, so you can go watch that if you want me to expand more. The arc that follows the preliminaries is the Tao family arc. I remember watching this for the first time in the original anime, and being really surprised by how much this pretty old anime managed to captivate me. It was one of my favorite arcs in the entire show, and there's just something missing in the new anime. I think it's because it feels too short. The arc starts in the same way as the anime and the manga. Ren gets home and starts his full-on assault on his father. He seems to be doing well until... Stop. What the fuck is this? Oh my god, this looks so goofy. He looks like, well, a cartoon character. The way this shot is handled is just so amateurish. First of all, the way the camera positions itself, the audience is forced, and that's important, we're forced to look at him as an equal. We're put on the same level. The way the scene is framed, it doesn't make him feel like a threat. Plus, the smile is just so fucking hilarious. I mean, this is the first time we see this person's face. The only other times we've seen him up until this point was when he was covered in shadows. Those scenes were building up this guy as a huge threat, and this is what we get as a payoff? I don't care if his eyes glow red for a bit before, he still looks ridiculous. Compare this to the shot with the same intended effect in the original anime. We see him as we pictured him, a huge, bulky menace of a man. We're forced to look up at him, and because of this shot, we get a good picture of how monstrously huge he really is. We don't even see his face in this shot, which makes him all the more intimidating. The next shot is a close-up of his face, and this is his smile in the old version. No comparison, man. This is just so fucking creepy and unsettling. And don't try to tell me that this shot is the same as in the manga, because no! It was way different. This is the image in the manga, and it does its job correctly. We get a sense of scale. We see how powerless Ren is in comparison. And this is his smile in the manga. How the hell do you fuck this up? No matter how you spin it, this first shot of Tao En is a pure sign of incompetence. It doesn't establish the villain of this arc as a huge imposing threat, and first impressions are incredibly important for this sort of thing. And it's not just this shot that the new anime gets wrong. There are so many panels in the manga that do its job at making Tao En look like an absolute monster, but the shots that were based off of these panels feel so uninspired and flat in comparison. Anyways, the gang finds out about Ren's assault on his father and decide to go and help him. From here on out, both versions play out mostly the same, but the new anime feels like it's going too fast. The arc only lasts like 2 episodes, and most of the time isn't even dedicated to the fight against Tao En. To be fair, this arc in the new anime is pretty much the same as how the manga played out, except for some really bad direction lessening the impact of certain scenes. And this is where I have to say something. A confession that will break all of your hearts, I'm sure, but I don't think the Shaman King manga is that great, at least for right now. I'm about 70 chapters in, and I don't see the massive appeal. When it comes to its sense of storytelling and progression, it only seems to do the bare minimum when in trying to make those story beats work. Let's take the Tao En arc for example. It's a very simple arc that doesn't feel like it has much tension or weight behind the character's actions or stakes established. It reveals a somewhat sad backstory for a character in the least artful way possible, basically tacking it on to the end, saying, "See? Doesn't this guy have a sad past? Ooh, so sad, he's crying." And that may be because I exposed myself to the original anime first, but the way that the original anime hits upon the same plot beats and storylines in the manga for now just seems to be a lot better in terms of execution. In the original, while Tao En's past remains the same, it's told much more effectively thanks to these little moments where he's humanized before the big reveal. It feels less forced and more impactful. There's a lot more tension tension and weight to this arc because of new problems that the protagonists have to deal with. One example of this would be Pai Long being possessed and forced to fight the main characters. This additional story beat works for both fleshing out Jun's character arc here, and it's a pretty cool way of foreshadowing Tao En's secret. The progression in this arc feels more earned. It feels harder. It actually feels like a story, a journey, one where the characters struggle and work to overcome those struggles. The fight between Tao En and the gang feels a lot bigger. It's a lot more climactic. It lasts longer. The characters take time to whittle En down, make him more and more pressured, not to mention the fact that the friendship between the main characters is better established in the original adaptation. And this fight is an instant improvement. It genuinely feels like the characters fought hard to get here, and the fight is given a lot more emphasis as a result. I just love how the fight plays out in the original anime. It starts out the way you expect it to. En is beating the absolute stuffing out of our heroes, and they struggle desperately just to keep up, but they keep coming back no matter how hard they get hit. So when it's revealed that they weren't just attacking aimlessly and were actually in control the whole time, and the iconic music starts to swell as the way to victory becomes clear, it's just really awesome. The original anime transforms the story in the manga, which was very straightforward and honestly pretty bland, into an equally straightforward but thrilling and emotional journey. And while I have been kind of ragging on the manga, this is supposed to be a criticism of the anime, so I have one last thing to talk about, and that's the animation. The animation in Shaman King 2021 is mostly absent. People claim that it is very faithful to the manga, and that's most apparent in the fact that the show doesn't seem to move most of the time. So it's literally like the manga, but missing the panel layouts which add to the experience. Almost every shot in an action scene is a still pose of a character doing something while the other guy reacts, or an explosion. And look, the original wasn't that great in terms of animation either, but it has the excuse of a joke that I used before in my other video than the show that was made almost 20 years ago. And the original anime still has more impressive shots of animation than the new one does. Animation is the main thing that people are going to look at when looking at an adaptation of a manga, and animation isn't the end-all be-all when deciding if an anime is good or not, but it is a really important factor. While there are shows that could survive without at least solid animation, there are just as many that wouldn't be nearly as popular as they are without it. Most of them are shonen, and this animation is really stiff. Like, Studio Bridge, we gotta talk. But I guess I'll have to rant about that again in another video. For now, I've covered everything I really wanted to, and I really look forward to reading the comments, both the polite and insightful ones, and the full-on mental breakdowns that most people will have since I don't like the new anime, and a little bit about the manga. I'll be going now.